Go ahead.
Okay. So Michael Brown was an 18-year-old African-American who was shot by a white police officer on August 9th, 2014. He was shot after stealing cigars from a convenience store with his friend Dorian Johnson. However, the police officer who shot him was not aware of the convenience store robbery at the time. As he was leaving the convenience store, the police officer pulled up behind him in his squad car and told him to get the fuck on the sidewalk because they were walking down the street. They responded by saying, we're almost home, just give us a few minutes. And I guess a verbal confrontation, the facts are kind of hazy, but a verbal confrontation took place. And then the police officer pulled up next to them, and they're not exactly sure who started it, but a physical altercation started taking place between Michael Brown and the police officer. And some witnesses say he was hitting him, other witnesses say he was just struggling. The police officer fired a shot and hit Michael Brown in the arm. He began to run. The cop got out of the car and chased after him and started firing at him and hit him in the back. And Michael Brown turned around with his hands up and said, okay, okay, okay. And the cop continued to fire. As he was falling down, he jumped on the top of the head and killed him. According to 9,000 witnesses, he was surrendering at the time when he was shot. And the 10th witness didn't mention the surrendering, but he was the one that pointed out that the officer kept firing as he was falling down. After he was shot, his body was left in the street for 4 hours by the police. The police, instead of taking away the body, decided to patrol the entire neighborhood with guns drawn. Even though many residents, it was an African-American neighborhood, so a lot of African Americans took it as a warning against them, with the body being left in the street. After the shooting, there was protests almost immediately, and a lot of black protesters came out protesting against police brutality and wanting justice for Brown. Unfortunately, a lot of the protesters also became violent and began looting storefronts. The police responded by sending out armored vehicles, along with cops who were covered in body armor and armed with assault rifles. The protests carried on for about a week, maybe even longer than that. The police began to clash with protesters, even the peaceful ones who weren't doing anything. A lot of journalists were also attacked, unprovoked, and arrested, who were trying to cover the event. As many of you probably know, the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s kind of displayed the relationship that blacks and police had in the U.S. The police treated blacks, even before the civil rights movement, as inferior. A lot of the time they were singled out and beaten, just for no reason, or accused of crimes they didn't commit. A lot of the time, a lot of civil rights workers were murdered at the time, and the murderers were let off. A lot of the time, the murderers were actually the police, including in cases like Emmett Till, who was a 12-year-old black kid in Louisiana who was murdered by a police officer, brutally beaten to death. So the consequences of this would be a mistrustful African-American population. Like they're not going to trust the police after, and it hasn't ended either. The police continue to be brutal. The civil rights movement isn't over. What this comes down to really is the 14th Amendment, which was meant to ensure a due process of law. Police officers can't execute citizens in the street, and that was what basically happened. A man was trying to surrender, and the police officer shot him anyway. The man was unarmed, already injured, and running away. It wouldn't have mattered if he was a murderer or a rapist or a drug dealer. All that matters is that he was unarmed, running away, injured, and surrendering. If the U.S. has any integrity left, hopefully Officer Wilson will be prosecuted for what he did. Even though Michael Brown wasn't allowed a fair trial, I think Officer Wilson should be. However, if he isn't held responsible, then, which is actually very likely, then you have to kind of concede that something went very wrong in the American legal system a long time ago, and it needs to be fixed immediately for the sake of all American citizens.